All right, 13 through 16 is solving equations. There are 4 of these on the test, so I would say all 4 of these are pretty similar to what you're going to see on the test. It is going to say to round your answers to 2 decimal places. So if they don't count evenly, you know you just need to round your answers. So remember, the key thing is to always get the base by itself or the radical by itself. Okay, so with this one, the first thing I want to do is I want to undo this 2 times that base raised to the 3rd. So the first thing I want to do is I want to divide by 2. Now each of these steps I'll make worth points. So make sure that you show me each of those steps. Don't be afraid to use your calculator. Don't be afraid to take 862 divided by 2. Even if you think you know the answer, it might be helpful to make sure you try it. So I get 431. All right. So that's worth a point, half a point, something that I know that you divided by 2. So now when I look at this and say I have this base cubed, I want to get x by itself, so I have to undo that cube. So now I'm going to take the cubed root. Because this was raised to the 3rd, to undo it, I need to take the cubed root, which means here I need to take the cubed root. If this is an odd root, I don't have to worry about a plus or minus. Okay, so over here, when I undo this, I'm just left with x minus 3. These are opposite operations of each other, and they just cancel each other out. I'm left with x minus 3. Over here, I got to figure out what is the cubed root of 431. So again, make sure you know how to do that on your calculator. You're going to do that under math. So you're going to go math, and if you look at math, you should see number 4 says the cubed root. So I go down to cubed root. I'm going to take the cubed root of 431, and it says to round to 2 decimal places. So 7.55, because that next digit is a 3. So 7.55. And then to solve for x, I just need to add 3. So again, you can show me that step. You don't really have to show me that's what you're doing, but you're going to add 3 to both sides of the equal sign. So I'm going to get x equals 10.55. And that's my answer. All right, so let's look at 14. 14 has several steps to do. Here's the root we need to get by itself. We need to get all of this by itself first. So I first need to undo the plus 7, so I'm going to minus 7 to both sides. So that would give me negative 24. Divide by 4, and I get the 5th root of 2x is equal to negative 6. Now all of this is under the 5th root, so I've got the root by itself. Now to undo a 5th root, now I want to raise to the 5th power. So make sure we take all of that, negative 6, and raise it to the 5th power. So now we're undoing a 5th root by raising to a power. Over here, remember, we had a power. To undo it, we took the root. Same thing, just depends on what you need to do to undo. So here I'm going to be left with 2x, because all of that's underneath that root. Now I need to take negative 6 to the 5th, so I'll go parentheses, negative 6 raised to the 5th power. I get negative 7776. And now to solve, I just need to divide that by 2. So divide by 2, I get negative 3888. So when I go to grade these, I will be looking for steps. Did you know to subtract 7? Did you know to divide by 4? Did you know to take the 5th root, or to raise it to the 5th power to undo the 5th root? This is what you got after you did that to both sides, and then did you divide by 2 to get your final answer? So those are the steps I'm looking for when I give points, assign points to a problem. So show me those steps. All right, so 15. Remember, this is the only thing that's affected by that power. So this 5 is not. If this were in parentheses, if this would say 5x all raised to the 3/2, then all of that would be your base. But it isn't. It's 5 times x to the 3/2. So we are going to first divide by 5. So I get x to the 3/2 equals 8. So now some of you are struggling a little bit of what to do to undo this. Now what you need to do is just raise it to the reciprocal power. So really the easiest thing to do is just say, I want to get this to be x to the 1st, so I'm going to raise it to the 2/3, sorry about that, to the 2/3. Why to the 2/3? Because 3/2 times 2/3 is 1. because when you have a power to a power, you multiply. And if I raise this to the 2/3, I would have to raise 8 to the 2/3. And so I would get x, and you can use your calculator. You can take 8, raise it to, just be careful that you have, usually I just use a parentheses just to make sure, you raise it all to the 2/3 power. Make sure that 2/3 is up there as a power. And you get 4. So I mean, you can use your calculator to figure that out, but really we could also do it in steps. So let me just talk through that. If you would have divided by 5, so you have x to the 3/2 equals 8. If you aren't sure what to do, you may want to think of this in radical form, because I think a lot of you think better in radical form. So if I write that as a radical, it's going to be the square root of x to the 3rd. That's really what that means. And so then you could say, all right, I want to undo, let's say, the square. I mean, I guess it's up to you which you want to undo now. It doesn't really matter what order. Let's say you want to undo the cube first. To undo something cubed, because this is the square root of x cubed. So to undo the square root, I'm going to square both sides. When I square this, it's going to undo the square root. Okay? And so I'll be left with x to the 3rd equals 64. And then I can take the cubed root. So you could do it in steps to get x equals 4. You could, instead of cubing first, you could say, all right, I have the square root of x to the 3rd equals 8. Instead of cubing first, you could, or squaring first, you could say, I want to take the cubed root first. And it's a little bit harder because now you're like, I don't know what to do with the cubed root of the square root. So I think that would be a little bit tougher to see what you want to do. I really think the easiest thing to do is to raise it to the reciprocal power. If you have x raised to any power, if you wanted to get it to be x to the 1st, raise it to the reciprocal power. Because all this means, remember, if you have 8 to the 2/3, even if you don't have a calculator, it means you want to take the cubed root of 8, which is 2. 2 squared is 4. But you also have your calculator. So I really think this starts getting confusing. I really feel like that's probably the best way to do that, is just raise it to the reciprocal power. All right, and then the last one, this one, remember, you have to be careful because you want to undo the square root. On this side, when you square a square root, you're just going to be left with x plus 18. But on this side, you have a binomial that you have to square. So if you need to, off to the side, take x minus 2 times x minus 2, or write it right here if you want to. If you want to just write it out as an extra step, you certainly can. That's what happens when you square a binomial, which means I have to FOIL that out. First terms gives me x squared, then I get a negative 2x. Inner product, I get a negative 2x. Negative 2 times negative 2 is 4. So because this is a binomial and I square it, I'm going to get x squared minus 4x plus 4. That has to equal x plus 18. So this side is nice because you undo the square root. This side you actually have to FOIL things out. So now you have a quadratic, so you have to get everything set equal to 0. I'm going to subtract x, subtract 18, and either use the quadratic formula or factor. I think this one factors pretty nicely. Pair of factors of negative 14 that adds up to negative 5 would be minus 7 and plus 2. So then I set each of these equal to 0, and I'm kind of running out of room, but I get x is 7. Here when I set that equal to 0, I get x is negative 2. But be careful, you have to plug them back in. So if I take 7 and plug it back in, the original problem, it would be 7 minus 5 is 2. Does that equal the square root of 7 plus 18 is 25? Yeah, the square root of 25 is 5. So that one works. But when I put in negative 2, negative 2 minus 2 is negative 4. And here I get negative 2 plus 18 is the square root of 16. Square root of 16 is 4. It does not equal negative 4 on this side. Remember, it's the original problem before you squared it. When you put in a negative 2, you get a negative 4 on this side. It doesn't equal 4. So then I just want you to cross that off. Leave it so I can tell that you knew the answer was negative 2, but when I checked the solution, it didn't work. All right, so those are the equations. One of each kind will be on the test.